The short story course is one of the 300 level elective courses in the English department. We have a number of different English 300 level electives. Some of them focus on the novel. This one in particular focuses on the short story, which I think differentiates from the novel in that it concentrates on one of the elements of fiction, which might be setting, or it might be characterization, or it might be plotting. But in some way, it's shorter, it's more compact. It's actually kind of like a little pearl in the hand, right? If it's done perfectly. In my classes, when I'm teaching, it sort of doesn't matter to me what I'm teaching. I'm always trying to teach students the same thing. I'm trying to teach them critical thinking, and I'm trying to teach them how to ask questions, and then I'm trying to get them to follow up on those questions. So in my classes, the most important thing is that a student gets something that he or she really cares about. Oftentimes I give them, at the beginning of the semester, I give them a handout called the contact zone. So I'm looking for places where they're being rubbed in some way, whether they love what the author is doing or they hate what the author is doing. I'm looking for some place where they're coming up against their own values or their own sense of the world, and then to use that as a way to go deeper into the work and to ask questions about it. So they ask questions and then they go deeper. And they use those moments where something doesn't seem right or something seems absolutely wonderful to them, and that's their entry point. I call it their hook into the work. And I'm always trying to teach students that, whether I'm teaching them a short story or I'm teaching them a novel. I often teach the Shakespeare class, and I'm trying to do the same thing in the Shakespeare class. So I think the most important thing that the students can get out of any of my classes is critical thinking, knowing how to ask a question and then knowing how to follow up on that question. So for example, one of my students came in one day. He's a Haitian student, and we were reading Junot Diaz, a short story collection called Drown. And one of the narrators says, well, we couldn't have been any poorer unless we were Haitian refugees, right? So this is a Dominican narrator saying we couldn't have been any poorer unless we were Haitian refugees. So I got into the class that next morning, and my student said, Professor, I am so upset. I am just so upset. I said, why are you so upset? Well, why would the author say this? Why would the author say that he couldn't have been any poorer unless he was a Haitian refugee? So I got him to tell me a little bit about the relationship between Haitians and Dominicans, and he said that Haitians were looked down upon into the Dominican Republic because they were refugees and that they were poor. So I was like, okay, well, what is the author trying to tell us? Why is this Junot Diaz saying this, or is this the author saying this? What is Junot Diaz trying to tell us about this author? What is he trying to get across to us about this narrator and about this story, so using this one small piece right in the very first paragraph of the story? So that's what I'm talking about in terms of the contact zone, where something comes up and they get so excited or upset about something, and they use that as a way not to get stuck in the upset, but to use it as a way of getting deeper into the story. I do think that taking English courses is a great way to prepare for critical thinking outside of the college and outside of the university. I tell my students it's the most important thing that they can possibly take from their college education. That if you know how to think, if you know how to ask questions, and then you know how to follow up on those questions, that's going to make you a successful person outside of college. That this is not something that they're doing just as a requirement for my course, but as a habit of mind, that it's what's going to make them successful. I had a boss way back who was recruiting Ph.D., people who were in Ph.D. programs, for public relations, actually. And he said that he can teach people to write, or he can teach people public relations, but he can't teach people how to think. And I think that's what the critical thinking is. The critical thinking is knowing how to stand back, to look at the whole situation, to say, well, how do the pieces fit together? And to take one piece, the hook, in my class it's called the hook, to take the hook and to use the hook to ask questions about the whole. and to look at how the different pieces go together. And yes, that is the most important thing that they can take out of my class, whether they're taking my short story class, or they're taking my Shakespeare class, or they're taking my English 201 class, or if they're taking my English 095 class, because I talk about it in English 095 too. So it doesn't matter what class you're in of mine. It's the most important skill that I think I can give you, and it's what I will constantly be asking you to do. And I try to do that through their reactions, because if I can get them to react to something, then they care, and then they take ownership, and that's the most important thing to me. I get reactions from students at the end of the semester that they'll come back and they'll say that they learned a lot, or they learned how to ask questions, or that this has become some sort of a habit of mind, that it's not something that they're just using in my class, but they're using it outside of my class. And I do think that they understand at the end how important that skill is that I'm trying to give them. And it comes through the writing, right? But the writing is a means toward showing the thinking. So they have a lot of opportunities to write in my class also. I try to do low stakes writing, and I try to do more high stakes writing. So a low stakes writing would be what I call a reaction paper, where they take their hook and they write a summary of what's happening at the moment in the story where their hook is. Then they have to, that's only a paragraph. Then they have to ask a question at the end of the paragraph, and then they use that question. They don't have to know the answer in the response paper. The response paper is a way of searching and formulating ideas. And I think that's probably one of the most important things that I do with students. I also used Blackboard in the spring semester, and the students had I was so thrilled with what they did on Blackboard, because then they started talking to each other, and they had an audience for the questions that they were asking, and they were getting feedback from their fellow students about the questions that they were asking and the ways in which they were going about thinking about those questions, so that they would switch, not switch, but they would deepen their thinking, because other students might challenge what they were doing. And I thought it was an amazing experience. I loved reading their Blackboard responses, and it seemed to me that they had fun doing it also. It was some of the best writing I've ever seen from my students. And yes, I think at the end of the semester I've had them say that they read more, or that they enjoy reading. And that's another thing that I hope that I can get across to students. We have such a, with all the entertainment and the means of entertainment that we have available to us, the internet and movies and etc. Reading, we don't have a reading public anymore. And I do hope that some of the authors that I introduce to them in the courses, that they might go to a bookstore and they might buy, for example, Junot Diaz has a new novel out. Well, they read a whole collection of short stories by Junot Diaz, so that I hope that they might go and feel that that's theirs too, for them to get and to read and to enjoy. Or I've covered with them Jhumpa Lahiri, and Jhumpa Lahiri has a new novel, collection of short stories, excuse me, out, so that maybe they would go and they would buy that new collection of short stories, or they would go to the library and take out the collection of short stories. But that this is something, that this is a world that belongs to them, and they own it, and it's theirs, and yeah, that there's an entry point there. And I think for a democratic society, for everyone's benefit, that we need a reading public. And so I hope that part of what we're doing, particularly in a short story class where I can introduce so many different authors to them, that they take ownership of that world, that belongs to them.